All right, so in this section, we're going to talk about the Redshift texture processor. So anytime you start the IPR, press the render button, or create a Redshift material with image texture in it, Redshift is going to make a file containing all of the mipmap levels that it might need for that image texture. By default, it's going to save that file wherever the Redshift cache folder path is set to, which, if you haven't touched it, it's in your app data folder on your C drive. So if I quickly navigate to my C drive, see users, username, app data, local, Redshift, cache, textures, you're going to see every image texture you've ever used in Redshift will be in this cache folder. Now you are able to limit the size of this cache. You can see in the render settings here, there's a texture cache max gigabyte. If you set it to 0, that means it'll be unlimited. By default, it's set to 32. And this is just going to make sure that you don't go over this texture cache limit. Now, personally, I prefer to have more control over where my data is going so that if I open this file on another computer or submit it to my local render farm or to a cloud render farm, they won't also have to rebuild all of the image textures to the C drive, saving me time and, in some cases, money. So there are two ways we can control where the data is going. Firstly, on every project, you can set your cache folder to your project directory, but personally, I prefer to just pre-process these textures myself. All right, so let's quickly take a look at what opening a scene with unprocessed textures can look like. So let's say I'm on a job and I just get past this file. I'm gonna say, all right, let's take a look at this guy. And C40 looks like it's frozen, which is cool. So why don't we spend our time wisely while we wait? Oh man, doing the slow-mo. That's not very nice. All right, let's see if C40 is doing anything. Not yet. Oof. Oh, all right, there we go. So we've got our scene is back in action. And I'm wondering, why the heck did that take so long? I only got one shader and like a plane. So if I investigate a little more closely, take a look at the shader graph here, I can see that these guys must be pretty high resolution because it seems like it was really slowing me down there for a second. Well, it turns out these are like 15K by 15K. And Redshift had to pre-process these when it went to load the shader ball, which is what slowed C4D down when I was opening it. And because I'm a nice guy, I don't want that to happen to the next person who has to open this scene. And I certainly don't want that to happen when I go to submit it to my cloud rendering service and I'm paying by the minute. Now, these image maps are already saved to my C drive because it processed them when it went to build the shader ball. So I should just be able to hit start on the IPR, and I'm still processing textures. And that's because even though my shader was processed, the image in the dome light had not been processed yet. So I'm all about making life easier, so why don't we check out this processor tool. So to use this texture processor tool, we're gonna have to open a command prompt, and we're gonna need two other things. We're gonna need the path to the texture processor application, which we can find at your C drive, program data, find Redshift, and go to bin. So I'm just gonna jot that down on Notepad real quick. And we're also gonna need the path to our textures. So why don't we navigate to our project and we'll grab this as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna open up a second window and we will take a look at the texture processor application. So you'll see if I double click, it does nothing. That's because it's a command line based utility and we're just gonna need to type a couple things up here. So the first thing we need to do is change our directory with CD to where the texture processor tool exists. Right click, paste, boom. So now if I type Redshift texture processor.exe, you'll see we get a list of variables as options for processing our texture. The only thing we're really interested in is that line up near the top right here that says texture processor input file options. So that means all we have to do to process our textures is type Redshift texture processor.exe grab our handy little link to our textures, copy, and we'll paste it in. But before I paste it, actually, I'm going to type a little quotation mark because I noticed that in my path to my textures, it says F:\Dropbox space. And that space is really going to screw us up unless we put these quotes around the whole path. So open quotation marks, paste, put a slash in there, and pick one of our textures. I'm going to say, let's do this guy. We'll just copy the name, paste it, and enter .jpg. Close the quotation mark and hit enter. And there it goes. So you might be thinking, well, it's cool that it does that, but that seems like a lot of work. I don't want to have to do all that stuff just to process my textures. So I've made a little script that will handle the nitty-gritty part for us. So let me just navigate to it. And this little script will be available to anyone. So I'm just going to double click on it. It says, hey man, here's an example of the input file. Cool. Let me go ahead and do that. Grab my guy here. But wait a second. Can I process all these at the same time instead of doing like 5 of these guys? Well, the answer is yes. So to process all the images in a directory, just paste the link to the directory, type slash, and type an asterisk, which is Shift-8, and then type .jpg. That's going to hit all of our JPEGs in that folder. So I just skipped ahead so we didn't have to wait through the processing. And I got all my JPEGs, but I also have an HDR in here. So would you like to process more textures? Yes. Whoops. Yes. And we'll enter the same input file slash. I'm just going to type all because it's easier than typing out the name of that texture. .hdr. Boom. All right, so I've skipped ahead again, so you don't have to wait through the processing. Would you like to process more textures? No. All right, so we've processed our textures, and we're good to go. So it's important to note that Redshift is still going to copy the rs text bin files locally. However, it does not need to take the time to process them. All right, so let's try reloading the scene. Now that all the textures are processed, I've gone into my texture cache and gotten rid of the locally copied and processed textures. So let's open our scene. Oops, that's the wrong one. Loads pretty quick. And let's just go ahead and run the render. Now you'll see it still has to process textures. That just means that it's copying them locally to my texture cache folder. All right. We didn't even need cat videos to get us through that this time. So thanks for checking out the texture processor section. We'll see you in the next one.